Hey guys, it's your host of thegarchompdaily again. I hope you guys are doing well. I wanted to make another video today, just going over fossil Pokemon, what their inspiration is, and what the history is behind them. You know, I wanted to do something more just because I left you guys hanging for 2 days, and I know I just posted our gold and yellow shiny tier list, which if you want to go see me rank those, the link will be below. But I wanted to rank some fossil Pokemon, really, just on not only how much they resemble their actual counterparts, but really, I just want to talk about them as well. You know, I'm not really more so focused on ranking, and that's not the biggest focus, but I will briefly go over, how realistic they are to their real-world counterparts. Again, don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and thank you guys again for getting me to almost 100 subscribers. I mean, we're halfway there, and I'm hoping to get there soon. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me and for getting me all, with all the views and everything. And hit over 1,000 again on my recent news video on what megas we should have, or at least what we should expect. And that was awesome. So let's keep riding together here. I appreciate it. But let's get started off. So we're going to start off with Gen 1, obviously, and that is the Kabuto line, the Ammonite line, and Aerodactyl. I mean, I can't really say Aerodactyl line because it's just Aerodactyl. I mean, it does have a Mega Evolution, but that doesn't count. But let's get started off with Kabuto and Kabutops. So Kabuto specifically is based off of what we call trilobites and horseshoe crabs. Now, trilobites and horseshoe crabs do look similar. They do. And there is nothing, necessarily wrong with the design. The design's absolutely accurate, but people fail to realize that horseshoe crabs and trilobites are actually not related. The only reason why they look so similar is because they go through a process called convergent process, or convergent evolution, which just means the species have witnessed very similar and intense environments to where they both develop similar to the same defenses and evolutions to help combat that environment in their own way, even though it may be similar. But both are still very, very similar. But horseshoe crabs got the leg up and have existed for just as long as trilobites. Trilobites and horseshoe crabs both really popped up 250 million years ago. 250. That's a very long time. And they were bottom feeders that obviously fed on the bottom of the ocean, and they were very abundant. Hence why we see so many horseshoe crabs now, and we see so many fossils of trilobites and horseshoe crabs just because there are so many of them. They're very abundant. They spread like wildfire. And it's a really nice Pokemon to see them base it off of, because it's a very common one and a very good one to get started off with when it comes to these type of Pokemon. Now, once it evolves in to Kabutops, that's where it gets a little bit sticky. Kabutops is kind of a mesh of multiple things. The biggest thing that it's based off of is a little bit of Trilobite, but its biggest part of it is part of the Eurypterids, or also known as sea scorpions. A part of the sea scorpions we know is known as the gigantic, this one's hard to pronounce, but the J-Calopterus. The J-Calopterus was a very big arachnid. It's considered probably the biggest arachnid that ever lived, ever, as it grew up to be at least 8 feet or more long, which is crazy. And it lived on the ocean floor, sorry. Just hunting fish and other crustaceans. At least that's what they theorized. And really, you can see it. I mean, sure, the eyes are very similar, and maybe its pincers are not the exact same, but they're very, very similar within how they're almost scythe-like. But you can kind of see that they're kind of jammed mesh with multiple different inspirations. As you can see, the trilobite head, but the pincers and body of the J-Calopterus, but the spikes of the horseshoe crab. So it's kind of a mesh of all of them, just to give it a big roundabout. But really, for such ancient Pokemon, it's pretty awesome to see. Now we're going to move on to Ammonite and Amistar. Now, Ammonite and Amistar are both directly attached to ammonites. Ammonites are the most common fossil, but also the oldest. The ammonites have existed for roughly 400 million years, if not longer. Some scientists believe that they have been around even longer than 400 million years ago. But obviously that study is still going on, till today. And with that being said, the ammonites didn't really see extinction until right till the end of the late Cretaceous, which was where obviously the asteroid hit and the great dying of all the dinosaurs, and there's probably a part of that. But because of how old ammonites are, they're usually used as index fossils. Because of how old they are, you can find ammonite fossils from anywhere from 400 million years ago to the late Cretaceous, as I said. And because of that, that means if you carbon date a ammonite fossil, and let's say that's 200 million years ago, that means all the other fossils that you may find around it are going to be the exact same as it. So let's say that you find a ammonite that's 65 million years old, that means the fossils you'll find around it are most likely, if not 100%, going to be from that same time period, which would be the late Cretaceous. So, because of how abundant they are, and I mean, they have collected almost over millions of just little to big specimens of fossils of the ammonites, and they've used that to help find other, bones of reptilian lizards, from aquatic lizards to aquatic mammals to dinosaurs. They've used a little bit of everything. And the cool thing about ammonites is that they were kind of diverse. They've even theorized and have seen them possibly, if not certain, live in small little pools or even rivers. So that can even help with finding actual dinosaurs, because we know the dinosaurs would drink from the rivers. So they will use those fossils to help find them. And the other interesting thing is, as the ammonites have gone forward, their evolution and their shells usually differ too. They usually would change different shapes and different defenses, usually spikes or balls or stuff like that to help protect them more. Which you see in Omastar. Omastar directly has spikes. Now, every evolution obviously evolves from their previous Pokemon form, but Omastar really takes that differently. It's really just an Ammonite that's just, I know it's going to sound crazy, evolved, but directly. Like, when you look at Charmander and see it become Charizard, it becomes like a big dragon. Omastar is just an oversized Ammonite with a bigger shell. And it doesn't go through the big changes that you'd see within regular evolution. It's just as if the Ammonite had lived longer and therefore developed to its surroundings. A lot more untraditional, but traditional for us, but untraditional for the Pokemon world. It isn't as much of a change as Ammonite, and I think they want to do that on purpose, just to show, like, hey, the Omastar that we see is really just an Ammonite from the more of the future from its current self, because of the spikes, which you see more common with later species and families of ammonites. So I think that's pretty cool that you get to see those spikes, because it's basically just telling the story of how the ammonites in our real world evolved and became more defensive and aware. Now to our next Pokemon. It is Aerodactyl. Now Aerodactyl may be, and I'm not, again, like I said, I'm not going to judge with realism here too much, but Aerodactyl may be the most unrealistic, but realistic at the same time. So the reason why it's most unrealistic is because it's so jumbled up with a whole bunch of different species, but it's based off of a bunch of pterosaurs. People fail to realize that pterodactyl isn't necessarily a dinosaur, as it's more so a flying lizard. And it's a multitude of species. It's called Pterodactylus. Pterodactylus is a jumbled up of where all the pterosaurs and such have all been categorized. So whenever someone says, hey, my favorite Pokemon, well, not my favorite Pokemon, but my favorite dinosaur is a pterodactyl, tell them, well, it isn't necessarily a dinosaur, but it's also not its own creature. It's a class of prehistoric creatures. And with that being said, Aerodactyl's just based off of just your stereotypical Pterodactylus. And really, it is a really nice design. I mean, it's what you would expect of a pterodactyl, I guess, or a pterosaur. Maybe not as smooth as we would think from a pterosaur, but again, you gotta think that this was made within the 90s, so there isn't as much well-known information about, well then, about pterosaurs. But its Mega Evolution tries to hit more into a little bit more of a scientific side of it, with giving it more defenses and spikes and everything, which were very possible for it. But that's for the Pterodactylus, aka known as Aerodactyl. But with that being said, we get to move on to Gen 3, which is Lileep and Anorith. Now let's get on to Lileep. Lileep and Cradily are a little bit weird, as they're not necessarily like fish or dinosaurs. They're more so prehistoric plants. And after the Cambrian ended, this is where their inspirations come from. Different types of underwater lilies started to bloom. The sea lily is what it is specifically called. Obviously, Lileep and Cradily. But again, these things were known as crinoids. Crinoids, again, they were very soft body, spiky underwater flowers that were considered carnivorous, and they would eat small algae and planktons and stuff like that. And they would use their little feather-like appendages that looked like leaves to capture their prey and for them to eat it. Now, Cradily and Lileep are directly represented from that, but they're not 100% accurate, as really the sea lilies were pretty one place. Like, they didn't move very often, and Cradily and Lileep get to move freely. So I guess they just got legs and just left the sea lilies behind. They just became ahead of the game. But crinoids are a very abundant species, and like the ammonite, there's so many of them to where scientists have also been able to carbon date and use them as index fossils. Now, not as vibrant as the ammonites, but sea lilies have still helped with trying to figure out the vegetation and how the seafloor was. But for this carnivorous little sea plant, I'd say it is pretty accurate, but the only issue is that it has its own legs. Now we move on to Anorith and Armaldo. So Anorith is specifically based off of a Amonalocaris. So Amonalocaris is actually kind of related to the sea scorpions. Now, they do not have a direct they don't have any direct proof, but it's theorized that there is a connection there between the species. And Amonalocaris during its time was its top predator. Like, it was more so going to the Cambrian period, more of a big type of like glider within the water, and it would use its two front appendages to pick up and snag up its food and eat it, rather that be crustaceans, even the ammonites it would eat possibly. It's a very mysterious creature today, but they still have quite a bit of fossils of it, and they're still studying it today to see what it's actually really related to. But Anorith and Armaldo are both directly attached, to it within what they're really inspired by. Now, Armaldo is kind of interesting to me, and here's why. Armaldo does look like Amonalocaris, but it looks like it's evolving. There has always been a theory that, scientists have, that eventually some of these creatures start to develop legs and appendages to get out of the water and go, be on land. And and you kind of see this with modern day amphibians and how they have been inspired from this. You see this with tadpoles, but you also see this from the amphibians millions and millions of years ago as they started to develop, and they became dinosaurs eventually, way down the line. But with that being said, Armaldo kind of looks like a Amonalocaris that is slowly evolving into, well, a dinosaur. I mean, it has the legs, it's starting to develop arms, it still has many of its bug-like, sea bug-like designs from the Amonalocaris inspiration, but it, even its eyes have gotten more soul and more, frosty in them to show emotion, which is, usually shown with a lot of dinosaurs. They're able to convey more, I guess, because they actually have fully functioning eyes. So with that, Armaldo is more so theorized to look like it's in mid-transition of becoming a dinosaur. And maybe we'll get something like that within the future. Maybe see what Armaldo eventually evolves into. Who knows? Next, we're going to go into Cranidos and Shieldon. Now, this is from Gen 4, and these two are probably the first actual, dinosaurs, like legitimate, dinosaurs. And Cranidos and Rampardos are simply based off of the Pachycephalosaurus. I mean, there's nothing else to it. I mean, it's uncanny. It's directly built like it. It's actually pretty accurate. Now, as we go along, scientists have started to say that the hard skull appendage on the Pachycephalosaur wasn't necessarily used a lot for fighting, but more so probably for display and for mates. So that means they theorized that maybe it was colorful, but no one really knows. But it was very impact to where it could withstand some hits. So perhaps it was like a last-minute defense mechanism to defend against predators. But it is more so a study that recently came out involving the Pachycephalosaurus. But yeah, Cranidos and Rampardos, I think, are, for the first dinosaurs on here, they're pretty accurate. Shieldon and Bastiodon. Again, these guys are based off of, Triceratops, multiple Triceratops, they're kind of a mixture of them. Rather they be from, Pentaceratops or Triceratops, just, they're pretty well able to convey. I will say, when it comes to, I guess, realism, a little bit less realism than Cranidos and Rampardos, but they are still very, very similar. And I think, for it being a Pokemon game, for good lord, I think it does it justice. I mean, they're great Pokemon. I personally love the designs of them. But another dinosaur that they could also be based off of is the Chasmosaurus, which is also a ceratopsid that has more of that square head crest, which is what we see within Bastiodon. Shieldon looks like it's more so like a Triceratops baby, but again, pretty accurate. But I love Cranidos and Rampardos. Just wish its typing was better. Now we get to move on to Gen 5 with Archon and Tortuga. So we're going to start off with Archon and Archeops. So these guys are probably the more realistic, if not most realistic, dinosaur, as it is directly inspired. Both of them are directly inspired by the Archaeopteryx, which is a feathered dinosaur. Again, it lived more so towards the Cretaceous, late Jurassic going into the Cretaceous, and it's a very feathered, almost bird-like dinosaur, and it's really seen as a genus that we have that's fully able to prove that some dinosaurs did have a lot of feathers. Now, not all dinosaurs had feathers, and we'll get into that later. But again, easy enough. It's based off of the Archaeopteryx. I personally love Archon and Archeops. I love its designs within Gen 5. I really wish they stuck with it and didn't do it dirty within 3D, but I still love the Pokemon itself. Now for Tortuga and Caracosta. So they're directly based off the Archleon, which is which is its own kind of genus, and it's from the late Cretaceous, but they want to more so tie Tortuga towards its smaller relative, which is the Protostega, which is a smaller variant. Sorry for the phone call in the background. But we can see specifically with Caracosta that Archelon is right with it. I mean, you can tell the similarity. Now, obviously, Archelon doesn't have feet like Caracosta does, but at the same time, you know, it's fairly accurate. I would definitely dock it for some of, you know, the leg and feet appendages, but yeah, I'm not going to be harsh because it is still a great design. I'm kind of forgotten. Next, we're going to go on to Kalos with, you know, Tyrant and Amora. Now, again, these are my favorite fossils, and we're going to start off with Tyrant and Tyrantrum. They are directly inspired by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I mean, kind of easy to see. And what I like is how they introduce kind of like feathering, and with the feathering, we know that T-Rex as a baby most likely had feathers, but as it got bigger, it didn't really have feathers all over its body, just because it was too big. But there have been maybe proof that there's some maybe around the neck and head. Now currently they have some fossilized skin of the T-Rex, which shows no evidence of feathers at all, and there is a big chance that as it became an adult, it loses all of its feathers. But the fact that they even introduced them still shows that, you know, there's a high possibility it had some, at least around its neck, and that's where Tyrantrum has them, is around its neck, and even has a beard with it, which again wouldn't be on the T-Rex, but I'm not going to dock it for that. But then Tyrant has it, you know, on its neck, and you know, it's pretty big for its body. Again, they're based off the T-Rex, and some may say that there's a little bit of inspirations with like the Carnotaurus or Stratosaurus because of some of the horns we see. But on Tyrantrum, the crest we see on its eyes is basically a crown, because it's, you know, based off of T-Rex, which is the king of all lizards, or tyrant lizards specifically. Now we go on to Amora and Aurorus, which is based off of the Amargasaurus. Now the Amargasaurus was a sauropod, and this dinosaur existed within the Cretaceous, but some people don't necessarily know today if its spikes on it really lasted or stayed completely exposed. Many believe that they were covered by some type of flesh filaments. Some people believe they were exposed, but no one really knows. But we see with Amoris and Amarga that, well, Amora and Aurorus and the Amargasaurus, they're really closely related. They both have long tails, which you see specifically with Aurorus as its tail is curled, but has a very long whip-like tail. And its spikes, aka its Aurora frail, looks absolutely beautiful. But it doesn't exactly paint the picture of exactly the spikes, but the spikes are set up the same as like a wing pattern going down. But again, remember what I said about them theorizing that they're actually covered by fleshy filaments? This is something that you could consider here, is that they're just covered. Even though that they do move. Again, this is Pokemon, so there has to be some type of fantasy to it, you know. But there's a good chance that that's what they're trying to express. Again, it's a very, very nice design, and again, pretty realistic. Obviously, not 100%. Which again, it's Pokemon, so I'm not going to blast it for it. But again, for a sauropod, we need more sauropod fossils because this one's amazing. And now we will go on to Galar. So Galar is a little bit funny. They're a little bit different. And because we got Dracozolt, Dracovish, Arctozolt, and the Arctovish. So with Dracozolt, obviously it's based off of a Velociraptor and some type of spiked dinosaur. Some theorize a Stegosaurus of some sort. The Dracovish is based off of that same Stegosaurus, possibly, with a Dunkleocteus, which is a prehistoric fish that was rather huge and had a crazy bite force, but it, its head is just attached at the end of the tail. And we have to remember that, because of us finding multiple fossils and then just blending them together, this is the actual messed up result of mixing those two together. Then you have Arctozolt, which is a velociraptor and some type of aquatic mammal or some type of plesiosaur by chance. Some people theorize it's part of the plesiosaur line. And then you have Arctovish, which is part of that, which is attached to that plesiosaur or marine mammal with its Dunkleocteus inspired head. There's not much we can go on about these, as they are really just jumbled up, fossil Pokemon. They're jumbled up fossils, and I hope within the future we get to see the complete versions of these. And I think we will eventually. I think they'll definitely expand on this more. But that is the entire inspiration of these. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about every single one of these fossils Pokemon that we went over, and like what the fossils, what do they mean to you? What do you feel about the creatures they're inspired by, and just let me know down in the comments what you think. Again, I've always had this very big knack for paleontology, and fossil Pokemon have always been part of my favorite. So I really appreciate you guys watching. As always, be a chomp above the rest, and I will see you later. Thank you.